Everyone expected a warm, thoughtful, carefully curated conversation. What they got instead was a slow-burning clash between two women known for their composure, one of them losing hers faster than anyone imagined. Inside a quiet Today Show-style podcast studio, beneath soft lighting and spotless decor, something was about to snap. And by the time the final question landed, Meghan Markle would be on her feet. Savannah Guthrie would be stunned, and the crew would be frozen in disbelief. No audience, no applause, just microphones, and a royal temper rising like a storm. The studio was small, warm, almost deceptively peaceful. Between two white boucle chairs stood a simple wooden table with neatly placed notes, 2 glasses of water, and the large silver podcast microphones that framed the entire scene. Soft shelves behind them held plants, neutral-toned vases, and perfectly aligned books. Everything about the set whispered calm professionalism. Savannah Guthrie exhaled quietly as Meghan Markle took her seat. Meghan looked sharp, deliberate. Her posture was straight, chin slightly lifted, eyes already guarded. The tension wasn't visible yet, but Savannah had interviewed enough world figures to recognize the early signs. Meghan was here to control the conversation, not to share one. Savannah smiled warmly. "Meghan, welcome. I'm really glad you agreed to sit down with me today." Meghan offered a small, polite smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, Savannah, I chose this platform because I assumed it would be a space that respects my voice." Savannah's smile faltered half a millimeter. "Of course," she said calmly. "My goal is always respectful conversation." "Great," Meghan replied, crossing her legs and smoothing her dress. "Just making sure we're on the same page." Savannah let the comment slide. She had expected some edge, but not this soon. She turned slightly toward the mic, her tone gentle and inviting. "So," Savannah began, "you've spoken often about rebuilding your life in America. How has this new chapter shaped you?" Meghan leaned back, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "It's shaped me by freeing me," she answered. "America is a place where I don't have to be reduced to someone else's caricature." Savannah nodded. "And yet," she said carefully, "many people feel they've gotten to know you through your interviews, your docuseries, even your podcast. Would you say the public truly understands you?" Meghan's laugh was short and slightly dismissive. "People understand whatever the media spoon-feeds them," she replied, "which is why I'm selective about where I speak, obviously." There was a faint, awkward pause. Savannah chose her next question with precision. "You mentioned before that leaving the UK gave you freedom, but some critics say you and Harry still talk quite a bit about the monarchy. How do you respond to that?" Meghan's eyebrows lifted, her tone sharpening. "Savannah, do you really expect me to feel guilty for telling my own story? Isn't that what platforms like yours thrive on? Stories?" Savannah inhaled quietly. "I'm not suggesting guilt," she clarified gently. "Just exploring how your past still influences your present." "Well," Meghan said with a tight smile, "maybe people should worry less about my past and more about the fact that I've built something meaningful beyond a title." Savannah held her posture, still calm, still gracious, but the temperature in the room had clearly risen a few degrees. She decided to approach from another angle. "Let's talk about your family now, your children. How are they doing?" Meghan hesitated, just for a moment, as if deciding whether she was irritated or insulted. "They're children," she answered eventually. "They're doing what children do, and unlike the world I left behind, I don't parade them for cameras, so I'd expect the questions to also respect that." Savannah blinked, surprised. "I meant it in a warm way," she said softly. "People are naturally curious. Curiosity can be invasive," Meghan cut in, "especially when it comes from people who have never lived under the kind of scrutiny I have." Savannah shifted in her chair, but her voice stayed gentle. "Understood. But you have spoken publicly about motherhood before, even in your podcast." "Because I chose to," Meghan snapped lightly. "That doesn't give everyone else permission to poke into my children's lives." Another pause, another temperature shift. Savannah made a subtle hand gesture toward her notes. "All right," she murmured, "let's pivot." But Meghan was already leaning forward, eyes sharp, voice cool. "Good idea." For the first time since the interview began, Savannah felt the unmistakable warning every seasoned journalist knows. This conversation was heading somewhere dangerous, and not slowly. Savannah Guthrie took a sip of water, slow, controlled, to reset the rhythm of the conversation. The studio remained quiet except for the faint hum of the cameras. Meghan, meanwhile, had shifted in her seat, her posture straighter, her expression tightening, as though she were preparing to spar, not speak. "Meghan," Savannah resumed gently, "in past interviews you've spoken about the challenges of transitioning from royal life to private life. Looking back, what was the hardest part?" Meghan exhaled sharply through her nose, as though the question itself were redundant. "Savannah, I think the hardest part was realizing how deeply people misunderstand everything. You know, everyone thinks they're entitled to judge what they've never experienced." Savannah nodded sympathetically. "Of course, I can imagine the pressure must have been immense." "But can you?" Meghan countered, tilting her head. "Can you really imagine it? Because unless you've had tabloids track your every move or dissect your every sentence, you can't possibly understand." Savannah stayed composed. "You're right, I haven't lived through that. But the goal here is to understand your perspective, from you." Meghan gave a thin smile. "Then I'd hope the questions wouldn't be so predictable." It was subtle, but unmistakably condescending. Savannah swallowed the flicker of irritation rising at the edges of her professionalism. She reminded herself, breathe, redirect, keep calm. "All right," Savannah said softly. "Let's take a different direction." She glanced at her notes. Meghan watched her carefully. "You've spoken a lot about empowerment, especially for young women. What does that look like for you now, in this new phase of your life?" Meghan crossed her legs again, smoothing her ponytail with one hand. "It looks like not explaining myself endlessly," she replied. "It looks like choosing projects that uplift people, not institutions." "Are you referring to the royal family as an institution?" Meghan raised a brow. "Isn't that what it is?" Savannah tried again. "Do you feel that, despite the difficulties, anything positive came from your time in the monarchy?" Meghan's lips tightened. "Well," she said slowly, "I suppose I learned resilience. And I learned that sometimes courage is simply walking away from toxicity, even when the world expects you to smile through it." Savannah nodded thoughtfully. "You've mentioned toxicity before. Do you mean the media, the institution, or your personal relationships within it?" Meghan's eyes flickered, a hint of annoyance seeping through. "Savannah, you see, this is what I mean. People want me to name names, to paint targets. I'm not going to give you that moment. I've learned that the world twists anything I say anyway." Savannah's voice remained calm, careful. "I'm not asking for names. I'm asking for your reflections." "And I'm giving them," Meghan said, her tone chilly. "Just not in the way you want." Another charged silence filled the room. Savannah tried again, choosing a topic she hoped would soften the atmosphere. "Let's talk about your work with Harry," she said. "Your projects together, the causes you support." Meghan interrupted with a sigh that bordered on theatrical. "Savannah, everything I do doesn't have to be tied to Harry. I'm capable of existing independently." Savannah blinked. "I didn't mean to imply otherwise." "Yet you did," Meghan shot back. "It's always Harry this, Harry that, as though I'm just an accessory." Savannah regrouped quickly. "Okay," she said gently. "Then let me rephrase. What is your personal vision moving forward?" That seemed to catch Meghan off guard, but not in a pleasant way. "My vision," Meghan repeated. "My vision is to create, to build, to thrive, without being asked to justify it. Frankly, I'm tired of explaining my very existence to people." "I understand," Savannah replied softly. "But part of a conversation, especially one meant to highlight your accomplishments, is giving people insight into your journey." Meghan's voice turned cool enough to frost the microphones. "Insight doesn't mean interrogation." Savannah inhaled, steadying herself. "It's not meant to feel like that." "But it does," Meghan pressed, leaning forward. "You may not realize it, but your tone, your questions, suggest judgment." Savannah's eyebrows lifted slightly, a breach in her otherwise calm facade. "I'm sorry you feel that way. That was never my intention." "Well," Meghan said sharply, "intentions don't erase the impact." The tension in the studio thickened. Even the plants seemed to wilt under the rising emotional temperature. Savannah made one last attempt to ease the mood. "Let's shift to something meaningful," she said, forcing a gentle smile. You've inspired many people around the world. When you think about your legacy— My legacy, Meghan cut in, scoffing lightly. Savannah, I'm not some relic on display. I'm a person, a woman with goals, dreams, plans, and I shouldn't have to defend them at every turn. Savannah opened her mouth to respond, but Meghan wasn't finished. And honestly, Meghan added, her eyes narrowing, I hope this interview won't be another attempt to twist my words. I agreed to be here because I thought you'd be different. The implication hung heavily between them, accusatory, sharp. Savannah, though shaken, maintained her composure. We're here to have an honest conversation, she said quietly. Nothing more. Meghan sat back, arms folding. Good, she said. Let's hope it stays that way. But inside, Savannah knew. Things were only going to get harder from here. The air in the small podcast studio felt noticeably heavier now. Even the quiet hum of the ventilation seemed louder, amplifying the tension hovering between the two women. Savannah adjusted her microphone slightly, a subtle signal to the crew that she was still in control, even if the interview itself was hanging by a thread. Meghan crossed one leg over the other, her posture still impeccable, her expression a perfect blend of polite irritation and restrained superiority. She wasn't raising her voice. She didn't need to. The sharpness in her responses cut cleanly on their own. Savannah decided to try a softer entry point. I'd like to talk about motherhood, she began. You've been very protective of your children's privacy, and many people admire that. How do you balance giving them a normal childhood with the public's interest in your life? Meghan let out a breath that sounded like an almost laugh. Well, Savannah, it's not exactly complicated, she said. I protect them, period. That's what good mothers do. Savannah nodded gently. Of course. And do you ever feel pressure? Pressure? Meghan interrupted. From whom? The media? The public? Trust me, I learned a long time ago not to care what strangers expect of me or my children. Savannah leaned forward slightly, keeping her tone level. I only ask because many parents in the public eye struggle with that balance. Maybe they do, Meghan said coolly, but I handle myself differently. It wasn't what she said, Savannah realized. It was how she said it. Every sentence seemed like a veiled jab, every answer a boundary marker. Savannah tried another approach. Let's talk about your projects, the philanthropic work you've done recently. You've spoken about advocating for mental health awareness and women's empowerment. What motivates you in those areas? Meghan gave a small, dismissive shrug. Motivation isn't the issue. I do these things because they matter, because I have influence and I choose to use it positively. I know that's hard for some people to accept. Savannah blinked. Why do you think that's hard for people to accept? Oh, I don't know, Meghan said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Maybe because society is still uncomfortable with a woman who knows her worth. Savannah sat still. I think many people celebrate strong women, she replied gently. I know I do. Meghan's eyes narrowed slightly, evaluating her like someone inspecting a diamond for flaws. Well, she said, I guess that depends on what someone defines as strong. Savannah ignored the provocation and pressed on. You've mentioned before that stepping away from royal duties was the healthiest choice for your family. Looking back now, do you feel you've found peace? Meghan hesitated. Not because she didn't know the answer, Savannah suspected, but because she didn't like the question. Peace is complicated, Meghan finally said, but I'm certainly better off than I was trapped in that system. Savannah nodded. When you say system, do you mean the monarchy itself or the pressures around it? Meghan's lips curled. Savannah, it's all the same. The monarchy, the press, the expectations. It's all one machine, and I'm done feeding it. The room chilled again. Savannah felt her jaw tighten for the first time. She still kept her tone even. Some might argue that by writing books, doing interviews, producing documentaries, you're still part of that conversation. Meghan's eyes flashed, just for a second. I share my truth, she said sharply. That's not feeding the machine. That's reclaiming my voice. Surely you, as a journalist, can appreciate that. Savannah took a steady breath. I do understand the value of speaking your truth, she said, but I also think conversation means being open, even to hard questions. Meghan let out an annoyed sigh. Savannah, you're not asking hard questions. You're repeating narratives that should have died years ago. That hit harder than Savannah expected. She tried not to show it. Okay, Savannah said calmly. Then let's pivot. Many of your critics— Oh, of course we're talking about critics now, Meghan muttered under her breath, just loud enough for the microphone to catch. Savannah paused. Meghan, I'm simply exploring both sides. And that's the problem, Meghan snapped. You think every opinion deserves space. Some don't. Some are just hateful. And frankly, I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Savannah's brows lowered just slightly, a crack in her polished neutrality. I understand that criticism can be painful. No, Meghan cut in sharply. You don't understand. You've never lived through what I have. Savannah swallowed, her professionalism holding, but stretched thin. All right, she said quietly. Then help me understand. That's what conversations like this are for. Meghan leaned forward, her voice cool and sharp. Conversations like this are usually for entertainment, for people to poke and prod and twist. But you know what? I'm not here to be dissected anymore. Savannah felt the shift. This wasn't irritation now. This was hostility. She clutched her hands lightly together, grounding herself before continuing. I'm not here to dissect you, Meghan, she said. I'm here to have an open dialogue. Meghan tilted her head skeptically. Are you? Because so far, it feels like I'm defending myself against the same tired assumptions. Savannah inhaled deeply. Well, then let me ask you something more personal, she said gently. What do you want people to understand about you that they don't? Meghan's response was instant, clipped, almost icy. That I don't owe anyone understanding. Savannah froze. That wasn't just defensive. That was a wall slamming shut. And the temperature in the room dropped another degree. Meghan kept going. Honestly, Savannah, these questions feel beneath me. I thought this would be a different kind of interview, not another attempt to box me into someone else's narrative. Savannah's composure slipped for the first time. Meghan, I'm just doing my job. Then maybe your job needs rethinking. The shock was immediate, not loud, not dramatic, but sharp enough to cut clean through the studio's silence. Savannah's eyes flickered, hurt, disbelief, restraint. Before she lowered her gaze, regrouping, Meghan didn't flinch. She simply folded her hands, waiting for the next question, as though she were the one interviewing Savannah. And in that moment, Savannah realized something. This wasn't tension anymore. This was a collision. Savannah Guthrie had been in journalism long enough to sense when an interview was beyond saving. She had interviewed world leaders during crises, survivors of unimaginable tragedies, and celebrities in their most fragile moments. But nothing felt quite like navigating Meghan Markle's simmering hostility in this small, echo-quiet podcast room. The atmosphere was brittle now, like glass under a hairline crack. Meghan sat perfectly poised in her chair, back straight, dressed smooth, not a strand of hair out of place. Yet everything about her radiated tension. A queen without a crown, daring anyone to challenge her. Savannah straightened slightly, grounding herself again. Meghan, she began, her tone gentle yet steady. I want to wrap this up by talking about the future. What do you see ahead for yourself, for your family? Meghan exhaled sharply, rolling her eyes, not dramatically, but enough that the cameras caught it. Honestly, she said, the future is whatever I create. I'm not here to give the world a roadmap of my plans. People will see what I choose for them to see, not more. Savannah nodded, unfazed on the outside. All right, but do you hope for reconnection with your family someday? With the royal— Oh, for heaven's sake, Meghan snapped, cutting her off. Are we back to that again? Savannah blinked. I only meant— No, Meghan said firmly. You meant to drag this conversation into the same tired territory every interviewer falls into. Family drama, royal gossip, conflict. I expected more from you, Savannah. The words hit harder than any shout ever could. Savannah's face didn't change for a moment. Then her eyebrows lifted just slightly, hurt replaced by a cool understanding. I'm not trying to drag anything, Savannah said. I'm doing what journalists do, explore the full picture. You've spoken publicly about these issues many times. Meghan gave a cold, humorless laugh. Yes, well, maybe I'm done explaining myself, especially to people who pretend to be objective but are really just fishing. Savannah inhaled through her nose. Her patience was at its end. "All right," she said softly, her voice firmer now. "Let me ask one last question." Meghan crossed her arms, expression stiff. "Make it a good one." Savannah swallowed, then leaned forward, professional, calm, but no longer willing to be stepped on. "You've spoken a lot about reclaiming your voice," she said, "but you've also accused almost every institution you've been part of, Hollywood, the royal family, the media, of mistreating you. Do you ever stop and ask yourself whether part of the conflict might come from the way you respond to people?" The silence was instant. Meghan's eyes widened, not with surprise, but with offense. "Wow," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "So that's where we are." Savannah held her gaze. "It's an honest question." "No," Meghan said, sitting forward, voice sharp like thin ice cracking. "It's a manipulative question, a passive-aggressive attempt to paint me as the problem. And it's exactly why people like me need to protect ourselves." Savannah felt the heat rise in her chest, but held steady. "Meghan, no one is painting you." "Yes, you are," Meghan hissed. "You all do. You pretend to be friendly and supportive, but when it comes down to it, you're just like every other reporter who wants a headline." Savannah clasped her hands together. "Meghan, I'm not your enemy. I'm asking for clarity." "And I'm done giving it," Meghan snapped, standing so abruptly that her microphone cord tugged with her. The crew flinched. The room froze. Savannah straightened in her chair, watching calmly, sadly. Meghan's voice grew sharper, but still not loud. Not yelling, just full of icy fury. "You know what, Savannah? I thought this show was different. I thought you were different. But clearly it's just another trap, another chance for people to twist my words." Savannah's tone softened, but her strength showed through. "This isn't a trap. It's a conversation. You're choosing to see it as something else." "Oh, please," Meghan scoffed. "Spare me the sincerity. I've dealt with enough fake concern in my life." Savannah closed her eyes for a moment, perhaps to gather herself, perhaps to hold back something sharper. When she reopened them, the warmth was gone. What remained was professionalism edged with steel. "All right, Meghan," she said quietly. "If you feel this interview isn't serving you, you're free to leave." It was the first time Savannah had sounded done. Meghan froze, stunned that Savannah hadn't begged her to stay. Her chin lifted. "Fine," Meghan said. "I don't need this. I don't need you. And frankly, this is beneath me." She pulled off her microphone, roughly, and placed it on the table with a soft but unmistakably contemptuous tap. Savannah didn't move, didn't respond, didn't plead. She simply said, "Thank you for your time." Meghan gave a cold laugh, turned on her heel, and walked out, heels clicking sharply on the studio floor. The door closed behind her with a muted thud that felt louder than any slam. For a long moment, Savannah just sat there, composed, shoulders squared, breathing steady. Then she turned to the camera, calm, dignified, unwavering. "Well," she said softly, "sometimes conversations don't go the way you hope. But part of journalism is asking the questions, even when the answers are difficult, or when the person refuses to give them." She gave a small, respectful nod. "Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back." Fade out. And across social media, clips were already being uploaded, dissected, replayed, and debated. Another interview, another walkout, another chapter in the saga of Meghan Markle. Fiery, complicated, unforgettable. If you enjoyed this dramatic showdown, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more intense celebrity moments, explosive interviews, and unbelievable walkouts. Hit the notification bell so you never miss the next story. Trust me, they only get crazier from here.